John, I've watched a few of your videos and I like them. The only thing is, mine is about the Philippines and not about Thailand. I hope you don't mind. My story starts just like everyone else's, a desire to leave my home country. I was from the southern US, in the state of Georgia, and I got by pretty well, working in the auto care industry. I started my business when I was quite young, and by the time I was 50, I already had a decent house, fully paid for, and investments to the tune of about $1 million. By all reckoning, this amount of money was enough to retire, even in the US. But I wanted to move somewhere else, have a change of pace, and a whole new life. I had friends who raved on about the Philippines, and about how amazing it was, and how far the dollar went there. It was meant to be a whole new exciting adventure, feeling like you were young again and ready to have a whole new take on life. I'd never even left the US before, and I never really had any intentions to go further than where I came from. I'm a good old patriotic American, love my country, love the military, and will do anything for the US on an international level. By that, I mean if someone's talking bad about the place, I will say something, otherwise because I completely disagree. But that didn't stop me thinking that I could do something different with my life. I could love the US, but that didn't necessarily mean I had to live in the US full time. I could live somewhere else, but still be patriotic with a love of country. Like many people, I had grown pretty tired of the liberal nonsense that seems to be taking over much of the West these days, and I had grown sick and tired of just how things were going. I think the country is in a much better position now, going in a lot better direction, and I'm thankful for that. But in 2017, when my story begins, things were looking on edge. I had no idea which way my country was going to go, and if everything I valued and held dear would be thrown out for a new and completely out of the ordinary way of life, I needed to do something about it. All of my friends felt the same. What was happening to the country? How could a small minority take over everything we held dear? But it was happening in front of our eyes. This hastened my realization that I wanted to leave the US, and the Philippines seemed like the perfect choice. I stopped my business in 2017. I kept my house in the US, which I decided to lease out, and my investments were paying me around $5,000 a month. So all in, I was getting about $6,500 every single month in income. It wasn't as much as I was making from my business, and while I was still in Georgia, this felt like not a great deal of money. But my opinions and my mind changed as soon as I touched down in the Philippines. This was going on for April 2017. My mind was racing as soon as I touched down in Manila. I had never seen anything as hectic and as crazy as this. The traffic, the lights, and just how backwards and unclean the place seemed to be on first sight really made me think if I'd made the right decision. But I was due to catch up with a buddy from the US that very evening, and I met him in a bar down P. Burgos Street. Being in the Philippines for the first time is a whole new realization of reality. How different people live, how different people survive, and just how different other countries can be. My buddy was so happy to see me. He lived close by in the Makati area in a condo that he rented, and he was dying to show me what it was like and what I could expect as well. I had no idea what to expect. Here I was, thinking I was planning to move to this country, and I didn't even know anything about the visas, the rental market, or anything. But after a while, I came to the conclusion that this was just about fun, and having fun was what I wanted to do. Not knowing what was going to come next, not knowing what to expect, and just being in a whole new place. As the night wore on, me and my buddy were getting through a few beers. That was when his wife showed up, this beautiful little thing. She greeted him like he was the king of the world, and she was small, stunning black hair, and the most beautiful face you've ever seen. And that's the thing. All the girls around the area seemed to be the most beautiful girls in the world, and there was something about it that drew me in. My buddy did tell me to be careful. You've got to find the right one, and things can go dreadfully wrong for people who get it wrong. But if you find the right one, things will turn out well. His wife seemed to dote on him, his every wish granted, his every beck and call answered, and what seemed to be the utmost respect. It made me think back to my time in the US. Like many people, I was divorced. My relationship with my ex-wife in the US was not something that I want to remember. It was very one-sided and all in her favour. It wasn't about what we could share together, it was about what I could give for her. She worked as well, and it was his thought because she worked, she didn't want to perform the duties of a wife, and we ended up falling out. So I should have probably had $2 million in investments, not $1 million, but that's a lesson that men have to accept at the end of the day. My first month in the Philippines, I just stayed in the hotel, explored the local area in Manila, and got used to just how different the place was. I also had been chatting online to quite a few different Filipina girls I wanted to date again. I didn't want to remain single, so I joined a dating site or two and delved into the world of online dating. Most of the girls that I was chatting to didn't seem to be in Manila. They wanted a husband desperately, especially a foreign husband, but they weren't in Manila. They were in places like Cebu and Bohol, and other places just like that. I did meet one girl online who was from Manila. We spoke for about a week and agreed to meet, but when we did meet, it was quite obvious what her intentions were. This wasn't meant to be a simple date in her mind. It was business, pure and simple. This turned me off, and we had a meal, or a very short meal, and we parted ways. I met another girl who was also from Manila a few days later. We chatted for a bit, and I decided to meet up with her soon as well. She was a bit different to the last girl. She seemed to be interested in getting to know me, as I was with her, but after a few days and a few dates, again, it was clear what her intentions were. I was not seeing any issues with this, just a learning curve, and a fun learning curve at that. I was having a good time after all. I got chatting to one girl, and we hit it off straight away. She was from Bohol. I chatted her for weeks and asked if she could fly to Manila to meet me. She seemed a bit hesitant to do this, but I said I would pay for her flight and meet her at the airport. After much convincing, she agreed, and I booked a flight for her from Bohol to Manila. It only cost me about $100 at the time, and I thought that was well worth it. We chatted online for weeks, and I got to know everything about her. She was in her late 20s and said she had no children, and she had not yet found a husband to settle down with. She still lived with her parents, and their house was, for a lack of a better term, rudimentary at best. She showed me pictures of it, and I couldn't help but wonder what it must be like growing up in a place like that, compared to where I had grown up back in Georgia. I thanked my lucky stars, but I couldn't do anything about it, so I put it to the back of my mind. When the day came that she was going to fly out, it went and met her at the airport. I can still remember her walking through and meeting me. I recognized her straight away, and she did the same to me, and it was like we'd known each other for years. We were both smiling from ear to ear, happy to finally meet each other, and we headed out of the airport back to my hotel in Makati. She told me this was her first time in Manila. She'd never been here before, and she was so happy to meet me. I told her that I was very happy to meet her as well, as you do, and we spent a great couple of weeks together, getting to know each other and seeing where the relationship would go. After a few weeks, she told me she needed to return home. She had a few things to do, and her family needed her help with something to do with the house. Something along those lines is what she told me. I was just happy to be getting to know her, and didn't really want her to leave, and asked her if she could stay a bit longer. Is there anything I could do to make this happen? She sensed what I was trying to say, asking if I could help financially in order for her to stay, but I think she knew that this would have been too soon. So she said no, but she will be able to come back in a week. I didn't push it any further and agreed I'll meet you back at the airport in a week's time. As the week went by, we chatted all the time. We spoke on the phone, and it just felt like a normal relationship. She flew back to Manila, and we got back into the same way of life. She told me that she had responsibilities in her village in Bohol. She needed to help with the family with their small shop in the local village, and her father had a small farm that apparently it was a long trek away from the house into the jungle, and sometimes her father wasn't well enough to make the trip, so she would have to do it. After spending a bit more time together in Manila, she told me that she liked me a lot, but she didn't want to spend much time in Manila. If I wanted to be with her, it would have to be in Bohol. I'd never even entertained the idea of going there. I was only a few months into the Philippines, but I agreed to fly with her to Bohol and to go and check it out. I knew it was an island, and I was expecting it to feel like an island, but the Philippines being the Philippines, Bohol Island was quite big. And as soon as we arrived at Pangalao Airport, we went to check into a hotel in Tagbilaran City. It was a bit smaller than I was expecting this city to be, but the scenery around the area was stunning, and I felt like this place was far better and much more beautiful than Manila. Manila, after all, just seemed like a concrete jungle, and this place had jungles and beaches and everything in between. I looked at my girl, don't want to share any names in this story, and thought how lucky you must be to come from a place as beautiful as this, but how unlucky you must be that this place doesn't afford you any of the luxuries that life has to offer. It was kind of like the country itself is so beautiful, well, therefore you can't have everything. That was my initial feelings. Her village was quite a way away from the main area, and she told me that she wanted to introduce me to the family, as long as we were shown to be very serious, even intending to marry soon. She just couldn't show up with me as a random boyfriend, as this wouldn't come off very well. I agreed to play the part. I was really liking her, and couldn't believe my luck that I had such a beautiful girl by my side. We took a taxi all the way to her village. We seemed to be driving for a very long time before we finally got there. Some of the roads were appalling, and the further you got away from the cosmopolitan area, things seemed to be a lot more rural and a lot more rugged. There was a hotel very close to her village that we managed to check into. It wasn't great, but at least it had air conditioning and a proper toilet. We stayed the night and planned to visit her family the following day. She filled me in on everything that I needed to know, and the following day, that's exactly what we did. I couldn't believe how basic and primitive the house that she lived in was. Her parents, although in their late 50s, looked like they were 80, and the house was riddled with holes, almost as though they'd been shot at. Close by, there was running water that was full of rubbish, and things just seemed so backwards and difficult and different to what I was used to. But then you took a glimpse up in one direction and you'd see the natural beauty of the place, such a contrast to the way people lived. I was introduced to her parents, and she even said that we would be to marry soon. They seemed very happy. We had a meal together. The food wasn't great. I'll leave it at that. Not great at all. After spending a bit of time in the village, we'd been together at this point for about 2 months, but things seemed like they were getting really serious really quickly, and I told her that I'd like to live with her permanently. She said she would like to do that as well, and I was happy to live in Bohol. I told her I would think about it, but first let's tour around the island, let's look at all the main areas, where the tourist areas are, what the beaches are like, and let's really get to know the island. Where did the other expats live as well? I wanted to get a good grasp on things before coming to any firm conclusion. We spent the next few days doing just that, and I started to fall in love with just how amazing the place seemed to be. Part of it, what's the most beautiful place you'd ever seen, yet part of it still had this intrinsic charm to it, like you were in a whole different world, or like you'd gone back in time to a place and time when things were easier and not as complicated. I met another guy who lived there with his Filipino wife. They lived quite close to Tagbilaran City and had a small restaurant there. The restaurant seemed very quiet, but when we went in, he was there sat at the bar. I wanted to introduce myself as someone looking to live in the area, and his eyes seemed to beam up. He had a chance to tell me that he was already living here and how great the place was. His wife seemed fantastic as well. She also came from a local village, and they seemed to be living a great life. It's funny that, how you see other people living and just assume that the way they're living in the moment that you see them is how they live all the time. But of course, we have to understand that this is not true. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But after speaking to this guy, I was sold on the idea of moving to Bohol to be with my girl and to begin my proper retirement. Everything from here was just a downward spiral. Mistake after mistake, argument after argument, and expectation after expectation from her. Once we were together, that was, she wanted and wanted and wanted and demanded so much from me. It was as though I was there to improve the quality of her family's life. I looked around and saw other expats living with their wives and wondered if things were the same for them. They seemed to be okay, but you don't actually know. Initially we rented a place in the city. It wasn't the most fantastic or modern of places, but it was all we needed. I think I ended up overpaying for it, as though I got it through my girl. I think she was making a commission on top of how much I was paying. Apparently, that's common. When we rented it, things seemed to be going great in the very early days. But one day, she came to me and told me that her father's crop had failed. Never told me what he grew, and said, "Oh, that's the same. Let's go and have a look and see if we can help." We turned up at the village and walked for an hour through the jungle to the farm, and indeed, it looked like whatever he was growing had not worked, and told me it was rice. But I didn't know if it was rice at all. I didn't even know what rice looked like, but it looked as though it had not gone well. It was only a very small area of land, so I asked, what can I do to help? And she said to me that to replace this and the lost income, it would be about $5,000. To me, that didn't seem like a lot of money, but looking back, there was absolutely no way that that small plot of land could generate that amount of money. Initially, I didn't think that she expected me to give the money. I was expecting to help in a more of a physical way, moving things around, maybe doing a bit of digging, exactly what I mean. But that evening, when we were sitting around having something to eat with the family outside their house, she asked me if I could give her father $5,000. I looked at her with a bit of a strange glare. "What do you mean?" I said. And she looked with a sad and forlorn expression of her face that because the crop failed, they wouldn't be able to sell it and they wouldn't be able to live properly for the next year. She made it sound so dramatic, and I felt like I had no choice. So I ended up handing over something close to 250,000 pesos. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was something like that. And it had begun. I was expecting this to be a one-off. Nothing like this will happen again, and I'd spoken to other expats in the local area who said that they'd never hand over money. The thing is though, were they telling the truth, or were they fabricating things slightly? I knew that people are different all over the place. Some are good, some are bad, but what's my girl actually after the money all along? Well, that's the thing. Part of me knew that something about it was to do with the money, but I expected there to be feelings there as well, not just a lust for money. After this little incident and giving her father the money, things settled down for a few months, until the next things happened. There had been a storm and it had blown over the family's house. Now this was true. We went for a look, and lo and behold, the house, more like a shack, was no more, and the wooden and tin and other materials lay strewn all over the place. Again, I was expecting to lend a hand in putting it back together, but no. I was expected, or asked nicely that is, if I could perhaps build him a small concrete house. I didn't want to do this, but when she's asking for things from me, we were having great times. We'd go to the beach, we'd go to nice hotels, we'd go for nice meals, and do everything that I wanted to do, with someone who I wanted to do it with. Did I really want to blow it by being cheap? That was my thinking at the time. So I think I gave something close to 700,000 pesos for a very cheap concrete structure to be built, thinking nothing of it. It was over. When we got back to look at it the month's time, indeed, it was built, and the money was used for it was what it was actually used for. It was about this time that I went back for a visit to the US. I wanted to visit some friends and just get a feeling of how things were. I'd been gone for about 6 months now, and when I got back to the US, things were not great. I just wanted to get back to the Philippines, but I'd committed to being in the US for 3 weeks, so there I'd stay. It was great to catch up with friends and family, but about a week into my stay in the US, there was some emergency back in the Philippines. She contacted me in tears, saying that the motorcycle that her father used to drive about on had completely broken, and he couldn't do anything he needed to do anymore, or get to any places in and around the village. Their small shop, which she said she helped with me when we initially met, turned out to be no more than a room in their house, the house that had been knocked down, so they no longer had a shop, even though they now had a better house. Couldn't work that out, but there you go. Apparently, it was desperately essential that I send some money while I was in the US for a new bike, so I did. Spent the rest of the time in the US having a good time, and then flew back to the Philippines. The first thing she said when we greeted each other was not, "Hi, how are you? I'm happy to see you." It was more something along the lines of, "We have a problem in our house." that we're renting and we needed to move out. She didn't say what the problem was or couldn't explain it properly, but she'd already found a new place to live in, moved all our things in, and we needed to do and pay for this. Well, I needed to pay, and this time it was more than the last place. I'm starting to think that she was getting more commission from the new place, or the people had stopped paying her a commission for the old place, which is why we decided, or she decided, to move out. As time went by, there were constant demands from her for this and that and just about everything. I don't mind supporting her and very occasionally helping out, but to be expected to do this all the time was just not something I was happy with. For her, it was just normal. Family helps family, she used to say, but they were not my family, and I didn't want to keep footing the bill for everything that went wrong. The final straw came for me when we were at her parents' house one evening in and around 2018. I'd taken a load of food that was cooked and we were chatting together, and it was brought up that maybe her father could do with getting a truck. He needed this truck so he could start a new business, moving produce about, something like that. That's how it was sold to me. And I was asked point blank by her if I could buy a brand new truck for her father. I was taken aback. I completely disliked the idea of her from this moment on and told her I would think about it and we would discuss it later. When we got back home, I laid it into her like I had never done before, asking why she kept demanding things for her family. This is not what I was here for, and this is not what I expected. She burst into tears saying she was sorry. She thought that I had a lot of money and was able to help. She didn't think she was doing anything wrong. And I told her she was, and I had no intention of giving any more money to her family. I'd help them with the house, I'd help them with the harvest and the bike, and that was going to help them with anything else. I'm not at all going to help with anything else, unless it was an emergency. She agreed to go along with this, but I could feel like she changed. She was still better off with me than she would be without me, but it seemed like she put her family first, at every single angle. We lasted another few months, but things simply were not the same anymore. She knew she couldn't get anything out of me, and her bubbly personality changed to being that of a miserable, insert expletive here. This is my story, the story of my first love in the Philippines and how it went wrong. I didn't lose a fortune, but it's still an amount of money that I would have preferred to have kept for myself. My next relationship with a Filipina was night and day different, and I'm still lucky enough to be with her now. I love listening to stories about things going wrong for people in this part of the world and how they compare to my own, and I wanted to share this one thinking it would have a good place on your channel. Be very careful when you get involved with someone in the Philippines. Some of them are fantastic, lots of them are after your money and money alone. So, have your wits about you.